Salutations, Utopians. Fresh off a weekend of some great NFL games that were slated, there's definitely a lot to talk about. The main headline that stood out to me was the Denver Broncos. For me, I can't believe how the mighty have fallen to such great depths, knowing the rich history and abundant history that the Denver Broncos have provided the NFL over the years. Some of the most glorious years have come from this franchise, and it's such a great, abundant, wealthy market that's continuing to flourish in this day and age, and yet the team is looking horrible right now. Okay, it all began with their quarterback situation a couple years back. For me, with the Brock Osweiler contract, they paid him record money and a record guaranteed amount of money. It was considered the Deshaun Watson contract of its era, and he obviously didn't perform. No need to pile on about his performance. It was less than desirable, and it put them in a very tough bind. And for many years, the Broncos had to work around that contract. But with that being said, had a very stifling defense that they had at their helm, most notably centered around an individual by the name of Von Miller. The Denver Broncos, as they went through their culture shift and under the Elway regime, felt that they needed to move off of Von Miller, who shortly after was sent to the LA Rams, only to win a championship damn near right away. And for those of you who know, Von Miller is one of the innovators of the hybrid linebacker, outside linebackers who can get pressure on the quarterback like a defensive end and yet is mobile and rangy from sideline to sideline like a linebacker. He was definitely a locker room guy. And so, as I said, he's capable of get you north of 100 tackles and multiple digits in sacks. And they let him go to LA and he won a championship. And then the run on the mill continued on their defense when they moved off of Shaq Barrett, who to me, I can never understand how they got no compensation from him. And then last year, ironically enough, to really put the finishing blow on the direction and the mentality of the franchise, moved off of Bradley Chubb, sending him to Miami, who this weekend played mercy. Otherwise, they could have beat them by a record margin. And what they got in return from him was a first and a fourth round pick along with the running back Chase Edmonds. In this process, when they finally got out of the Brock Osweiler purgatory, they went immediately and said, let's go ahead and get ourselves Russell Wilson, who many have questioned really how valuable was he truly to the Seattle situation. Was it the situation, or was it him, or was it a combination of both? He had a very interesting journey. He came, he was a transfer guy, which, now we see is being utilized more and more, and it's becoming more of a headline commercial-wise on the collegiate level. He goes to, after all these years, he lands in Seattle. He was an undersized quarterback. I think that's why the Broncos thought, let's go ahead and get Sean Payton. Not only is he available, he coached a similar type of archetype quarterback in Drew Brees, undersized quarterback, so he might have a system that he can do it. Brees was deceptively mobile, was a second round pick out of Purdue. They're like, let's go ahead. But Russell walked into a king's ransom in fortune when he went to Seattle. Don't get me wrong, he inherited an amazing situation where he was in a position to not mess it up. You had an all-world defense, Legion of Boom secondary. You can match them up in top 5 of any era. I'm talking Andy Reid's Philadelphia team with Bobby Taylor and Troy Vincent and Dawkins. It's up there with those type of secondaries. And then you have the defense. The linebackers were amazing. The defense was amazing. I want to point out, we know about Wagner at linebacker, and we know about their safeties, and we know all about Bennett on the defensive line. Cliff Averill was the only defensive end that I ever seen. He was like the first defensive end in Madden to have a speed and acceleration both that was north of 90. This man was constantly putting pressure. I don't know how Detroit let him go. He's from Purdue as well, but they did, and he ended up with Seattle as a free agent guy. And then so that defense was all world, all time great. You can put them in top 10 and nobody's going to put up an argument. And then you factor in beast mode Marshawn Lynch out of Cal. absolute breaking tackle machine, and not to mention a great locker room guy who to this day everyone talks about on a commercial level. You're still seeing him remaining relevant amongst the graces of the TV world. And so a lot of people were wondering, because I watched Russell, and for me, I never understood, quite honestly. I mean, he had some individual highlights, but I've always seen him more of a 200 yards passing, one rushing touchdown, one vertical pass. And it, to me, is just hilarious that, you know, the way life works, the symbolic moment in which that Malcolm Butler interception from that Bevel call, even though, you know, Pete Carroll took all the shoulder blame for that. And, you know, Pete Carroll, let's talk about it. You know, he's won on the collegiate level at the highest level, and he won in pro level. And him and Russell weren't clicking on that last year. And what further added insult to injury was the fact that Geno Smith, who was in the who had such a disappointing start with the Jets, not really to his fault, because, you know, he went into a defensive environment and didn't really necessarily get under the wing of a coach who's known for being offensive or being a quarterback whisperer at the very least. And so that was a disaster. Plus he had a locker room incident, and it was just time for him to go. And what he did was stay out the way, below the radar, went to a place where there was no quarterback controversy, ends up getting his opportunity and never looking back. And now him and you know, Pete Carroll have as good a chance as anyone to win a championship this year with the Seattle Seahawks. And conversely, you look, and now Denver's right back to where they began. Quarterback purgatory due to that just horrible contract. And everyone wants to put the blame, and I've seen a lot of blame, the defensive coordinator. No, to quote the great movie, one of the greatest sports movies of all time, Remember the Titans, attitude reflects leadership. The leader is Sean Payton. He's paid. And when he made those comments this offseason, not only bigging up the Broncos while putting down the Jets, I couldn't help but feel like this is not a guy who's really, this feels like this is a move that someone who's retired, someone who's not really in the mind state to be able to turn around a franchise. And people want to tell them they're markedly improved at quarterback offensively. Granted, they're number one, they're WR1. Tim Patrick went down with an injury, and that didn't help. They're not a quarterback away. It's no one particular. They just have for years have been neglecting their defense. I keep seeing this big error being made. Okay. Not every team is going to land a Pat Mahomes, a Herbert, a Lamar Jackson, a Josh Allen. Every franchise doesn't have that opportunity. But that Denver team can find them some defensive players. A Surtain, a Randy Gregory, a Von Miller, a Brad Chubb, Simmons. You got a real situation right now. And now that they're in such salary cap hell, expect them to go on a fire sale in the next couple weeks and start. And this is what you got to do when you're in a bad situation. You got Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, safety Justin Simmons, Joey Duell, Randy Gregory, as I mentioned, and Greg Boyles. All these guys you might as well move off of and get a bunch of guys in there who are playing for a little bit of minutes, and find some new young talent that you can groom, because this is going to be a long rebuild since you have so much tied into Russell Wilson, who consumes 10% of their salary cap. He's not going to be able to live down that first year that he had in Denver, where he was making all these special requests about an office and this and that. They're going to have to go find their Brock Purdy and basically build from within, because this is now they're stripped. They gave up Noah Fant, they gave up draft picks to Seattle. They got fleeced. It's one of the worst fleecings in all time in terms of sports history. And why you see Elway having to step down quietly from his role, because this is a hopeless situation now. I don't know what's to come. I don't know what the future is, but this is crazy to see this fall of grace from the Denver Broncos, such a rich, storied franchise. This is truly unfortunate. All the best, Utopians. Stay tuned.